The day was the 20th of June 1949, when Walt and the Disney family came to Southampton. Arriving on the south coast to supervise production for his first live-action film to be made overseas, Treasure Island, the plan was for Walt, his wife Lillian, and his daughters Sharon and Diane to then enjoy a 6-day motoring holiday around the United Kingdom, culminating in a visit to Scotland. It is disputable how much of a hand Walt had in organising the trip. For Walt, holidays brought no enjoyment. Holidays brought distraction from his work. Work was his fun. For him to leave his work, there would have to be something he could bring home to his work. There had to be a reason, and a reason incentivised Walt to go. Walt would tour the United Kingdom under one condition. Along the way to Scotland, he would be allowed to stop by at a small village in the Lincolnshire county. This is the story of when Walt came to Norton Disney. Private and Personal read Walt's diary on his assessment of Norton Disney upon his arrival on the 7th of July 1949. The small village with a population of roughly 200 people had, by that afternoon, become the grounds for a visit from the most recognisable man in the world. Armed with a photographer and a cine camera to make a home movie of the visit, the Disney convoy landed in the civil parish. Walt himself had 3 prints of Disney characters on hand, which he would present to the locals, but kept on him at all times to ward off any autograph hunters. The visit was no doubt one that left an impression on Walt. A proud Missourian from Marceline, Walt identified with the villagers' way of life. Having grown up on a farm, he held conversations with stockmen about raising pigs. One resident, Hilda Kinnersley, described a scene in her local pub, the St. Vincent Arms, later named the Green Man, where the Disneys joined in a game of darts with her group, and as a final act before departing, Walt would visit the Norton Disney Village Hall to give 3 original sketches of Pinocchio, Snow White, and one of the 7 Dwarfs as a token of gratitude. All 3 sketches were hung inside the hall and were all signed by Walt Disney himself. His diary entry, written on his departure, is quintessential Englishness in a way that furthers the impact of an all-English village on a Midwestern American. "Afraid I must pop off now," he said. "Learned that expression over here. You English are always popping places." Walt's interest in his ancestry was set in motion long ago when he was made aware of his Irish heritage. His great-grandfather, Arundel Elias Disney, and the Disney family had originated from County Kilkenny in Ireland, emigrated to North America in 1834. In Kilkenny, a Disney, boasted Elias Disney, Walt's father, was celebrated, classed among the intellectual and well-to-do of his time and age. But what happened before then? Why was a Disney classed among the intellectual and well-to-do of his time before Walt himself was? Were Elias's words mere empty boastfulness? Or were there really Disneys who came before, who stood as the awe of the world? These questions had nestled in Walt's mind for years, and his answers finally came in a guided tour with the then Reverend R.K. Roper of St. Peter's Church in Norton Disney. There, Walt toured the Disney Chapel, which contains the tombs of Sir William Disney I, Joan Disney, the wife of William Disney I, Sir William Disney II, and Hortensia Disney. Walt also saw the Disney brass, which was mounted in 1580. Structured in 5 compartments, the brass commemorates 2 generations of the Disney family. The top, featuring William Disney, his wife Margaret, a joiner, and their 5 daughters and 4 sons. And below, William's son Richard, with his 2 wives, Nell and Jane, and their children. Their depictions, particularly the male figures, convey them as models of conventional 16th century piety, and their recognition in the brass is continued in the inscription below. The life, conversation and service of the first above named William Disney and of Richard Disney, his son, were commendable amongst their neighbours, true and faithful to their prince and country and acceptable to the Almighty. Starstruck as Walt was by all these findings, he would be even more in awe when the Reverend R.K. Roper laid out for Walt and his family the rise and fall of the Disneys in Norton Disney. In 1066, the Battle of Hastings was won, and William, Duke of Normandy, had claimed the throne of England. In recognition of their loyalty, William gave the title Lords of Isigny to Hugh Sahard and his son Robert. The Norman lords, now named Hugh and Robert Disney, were granted a vast stretch of land and settled in the Lincolnshire area. A sketchy history clouds the family's early years, but what is certain is that they became a family of some significance, prospering as farmers before occupying positions of high authority and status for several hundred years. Over the 12th and 13th centuries, the family surname would be anglicised to Disney, and following the marriage of Sir William Disney I with Joan Dive of Kingerby, the family would adopt a new coat of arms, the famous three lions, passant gardon, with the three lions inferring courage, vigilance and prudence. 600 years before Walt broke ground on a field of orange groves and walnut trees in Anaheim, California, the name Disneyland, as shown in a charter signed in 1386, marked the small area as the Disney estate. The family would acquire further lands in and become lords of the manors of the neighbouring parishes of Carlton-le-Morland and Swinderby in Tudor times as a consequence of the dissolution of the monasteries. It is likely that these lands and titles seem to have been given following the family's support to Henry VIII in putting down the Lincolnshire uprising of 1586. As a side note, the Carlton-le-Morland branch left the village following the renovation of Somerton Castle in the early 17th century. Despite the fact that the family would leave the castle after living in it for a few decades, Somerton Castle can be given credit for being the first Disney castle. But the fall was inbound, and it started with internal affairs. Later in the 17th century, Sir Henry Disney brought a series of legal cases against other family members to challenge the will of his grandfather, Sir Richard Disney. The cases were unsuccessful, but the affair left their own scars in the Disney family, as the names of 7 of Richard Disney's sons were struck from the brass plaque in the church in Norton Disney, explaining the rectangular gap. The family would continue to shrink in numbers and stature, with the Disney legacy finally ending in Norton Disney when the last lord of the manor, Molyneux Disney, sold the manor to the Duke of Albemarle in 1674. Years later, in 1685, his only son, William, was executed for his part in the Duke of Monmouth's rebellion. He was survived by 7 daughters, but the direct family male line had come to a full stop. The demise was total. William's surviving daughters did not continue the family name, and the manor of Norton Disney was pulled down by the end of the 17th century. The Disney name had all but been tarnished by public shame. The family, who had built the hamlet and had risen to become the rich and powerful of their day, had been irreversibly humbled. The days of Disneyland was dead. The result was the family's exile from England, fleeing to Ireland around the end of the 17th century. Some would cross the Channel to France, while others, including Walt's great-grandfather Arundel, took the long voyage across the Atlantic to the New World and began the American chapter of the Disney story. Disney in the public eye is a name associated with many ideals of the American dream, the romanticism of dreams coming true, succeeding against all the odds, and achieving unrivaled success being just a few. It is a reputation that has as much been created by public perception as by Walt's own story and his own beliefs. Walt's surname had become as much a modern legend as a brand. Walt Disney stood for drive and power, but as Walt found out, these were ideals that characterised generations of the Disney family tree. Naturally, some will dispute whether Walt's connection to the Lincolnshire Disneys was certain or circumstance. After all, it is hard to know if someone is in direct lineage with a family whose history dates back to William the Conqueror. But what is certain, however disputable the connection may have been, Walt certainly ran with it. It started small. The naming of the first theme land of the original Disneyland as Main Street was a nod to Norton Disney, but was thematically more in line with turn of the 20th century small-town Americana, resembling his hometown of Marceline. But a bigger opportunity came along and would be the perfect excuse for Walt to express his true heritage. For the 10th anniversary of the original Disneyland in California, 1965, Walt wanted to add an element to Sleeping Beauty's castle to bolster the facade. Remembering his visit to Norton Disney, Walt was starstruck by the 14th century tomb of Sir William Disney II, found in St. Peter's Church, and more specifically, the coat of arms on the shield. It was photographed and reproduced on the castle by a group of Disney artists. The Disney coat of arms was stamped all over the castle, appearing on the castle's archway and featuring his individual lines on each of the castle's banners. Now knowing Walt's genealogical journey, adding the Disney family coat of arms to the magical kingdom can be said to be more than just further adding to the castle's medieval iconography. For Walt, adding the Disney coat of arms would stamp his family signature all over the kingdom he'd created and serve as a homage to and a connection to the lineage of the Disney family. From his forefathers in Hughes and Robert Disney to its latest success in Walt himself and the good, the bad, the powerful and the humble in between, all were unified in Walt's eye by a drive, a prestige, the perfections and the imperfections that was unmatchable and unmistakably Disney. But furthermore, it served as an eternal symbol of gratitude to that small village in Lincolnshire that gave him an understanding of his place in his family's history, a tribute to a Disneyland far away which gave him his long sought after answers. Today, in every Disneyland around the world, the three lions fly on the flags of every Sleeping Beauty castle, and in 2006 would make a surprise appearance as a small Easter egg as part of the new Disney logo. As Dead Man's Chest, the first film to feature the logo, begins, the camera points to a star so bright before panning back to a flag proudly blowing in the wind, featuring three lions facing left, a tribute both to the might and power of a media empire at a small village in Lincolnshire which made the most successful media mogul of all time proud of his family ancestry.